I was a freshman at Ohio State in the early 1980s. As an out-of-towner in my first year at Ohio State, I found a whole new group of friends. One of them was from Columbus and had interest in local lore, especially ghost stories. One story he hadn't checked out was the ghost of Walhalla Ravine. So one Friday night, while our dorm mates were getting their drunk on, the two of us decided to check out the story to see if there really was anything behind this ghostly tale. Let me tell you, Columbus is a big city. It was sort of a shock when we entered Walhalla Ravine. It didn't seem like we were in the city any longer. We were actually out in the country. The temperature even seemed to drop as we walked under the canopy of trees. There aren't many homes actually along the side of the ravine, as most of them are up at the top of the steeply sloping ravine walls. As we walked, my friend gave me the story of how the ravine is haunted. The story went back to the 1950s. There was a family that lived in a house just beside the bridge that crossed above the ravine. The husband worked at Ohio State, and he would actually walk back and forth from campus each day. My friend was really into the story, and I'm not too proud to admit, but the further we got into the ravine, and the more he said about the story of the ghost, the more I got creeped out. Sort of like an infection. When he said that people felt like they were being watched while walking the ravine at night, I got this paranoid suspicion that eyes were tracing my every step. I couldn't help but look into the trees along the ravine. I never saw anything, but I sure couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. My friend went on the story. The man who used to live on the ravine came home one night, and something bad must have happened at his house. The neighbors reported they heard an argument that night coming from the house. No one really knew how bad it was, but the man must have lost his mind because he killed both his wife and his daughter. The story told that the man decapitated his wife and threw her head into the ravine. When my friend said that, my stomach lurched a little, and I really wanted to turn around and head back to campus. My friend was totally into our little trip and the story, so I stuck with it. He said there was a sign when the ghost would appear. The sign was a blue light that would appear in the house where the murder had taken place. Well, it seems as if my friend's timing was perfect. Just as he finished with that part of the story, we had reached the bridge that spanned over the ravine. The murder house was sitting just past the bridge, and I'll be damned, but a window on the second floor of the house glowed blue. Let me tell you, a chill went up my spine, an Arctic chill. Just then my friend said, "Look." I asked if he was talking about the window, but he said, "Check out the bridge." A man stood up on the bridge, cloaked in shadows. He was wearing clothes that were out of date, but the real thing that stood out were his eyes. They seemed to be glowing red, and there was a sense that was emanating from him, something evil. When I said Arctic chill before, now I felt like I was at the North Pole as fear filled my body. In my whole life, I never wanted to be able to teleport like I did then. The story only got worse after that. A noise came from our left. It sounded like something was rolling through the underbrush, down the side of the ravine. Whatever it was, it bounded through the bushes and underbrush. There was no doubt in my mind that a woman's head was about to roll out of the undergrowth right onto our feet at any moment. That's when my friend acted like an Olympic sprinter, turned and raced back down the street away from the bridge. I was slow on the uptake, but I got the message and was behind my friend in seconds. I think we must have set a world record when we raced out the other side of the ravine. We didn't tell our roommates about it because we were sure they would say we were crazy or drunk. But we were equally sure we had seen something in that ravine, and it was very, very real. I grew up on the near west side of Columbus, Ohio back in the 1980s. My family didn't have a lot of money, so summers were sometimes long and almost always boring. Being bored always meant trouble for a teenager back in my day. So we had to find fun where we could. I had a buddy who always wanted to go to Greenlawn Cemetery for some ghost hunting. At least that's what he called it. For me, it meant not being bored. But it ended up being more exciting than I wanted to be, and a lot more frightening. The cemetery is located southwest of downtown. It's a massive cemetery that had over 100,000 graves back in the 80s. I'm sure it has a lot more now. To heighten the experience, or so my friend said, we had to go at dusk. The closer to sundown, the better. As soon as we entered the cemetery, I quickly felt things were just not right. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was some intuitive sense within me that seemed to be telling me that I was in danger. But there was nothing I could see in the place but endless lines of headstones. Still, the deeper we got into the cemetery, the more I felt like someone was watching. But when I scanned the area, we seemed to be the only people there. At least the only living people. Whenever I looked around, I thought I saw something out of the corner of my eye, like shadows moving among the headstones. But my eyes never landed on anything tangible. It was as if whatever was out there knew I was looking for it and ducked out of view when I tried to catch it in my sight. No matter what, it creeped the hell out of me, and I started to regret coming on this little adventure. Maybe being bored wasn't such a bad thing, but my friend kept urging me to continue on with him. The best was yet to come, he said. So on I went. He led me to an old granite mausoleum deep in the cemetery. The mausoleum was surrounded by a grassy area with short steps leading up to it. As I stood at the bottom of those steps, I felt something emanating from the stone structure. I couldn't pin it down to anything specific, but whatever it was, it just upped the creep factor of the place. We stood there for seconds, as if we'd been frozen in place. I think by now that my friend was getting just as scared as I was. But we were young guys, and there was something written in blood in the man code that forces you to face your fears. My friend broke our stasis as we headed up the steps to the doors of the mausoleum. They were heavy metal doors, and they were locked tight. As we stood outside those doors, my friend said, "Did you hear that?" I said, "Hear what?" thinking he was screwing with me. His eyes were wide, though, and he said, "Voices, I think." I looked around to make sure there was no one else around, but we were totally alone there. "Not out there," he said. "I think it's coming from inside." I quickly transitioned from being creeped out to outright fear. Still, I thought he might be messing with me again, so I leaned my ear close to the door. What I heard filled my veins with ice water. Whispers came through a crack in the door. They were indistinct, but I thought I sensed a dark undertone in their intent.
"Come inside, stay with us forever."
So I took a long step back. My friend made a chicken sound and started teasing me for being a total wuss. But I was just done with this place. Energy coursed through my body and my feet wanted to run. That's my friend said that there's a legend about the mausoleum that said if you knocked on the door, someone would knock back. That's when he dared me to knock on the door. I said, "There is no way I'm doing that." But he said he would tell all my friends that I was a complete and total chicken. With the man code once again invoked, I had no choice but to knock on that door. With the light ebbing away faster and faster, I thought it was best to get this over quickly and marched right up to the door. So when I pulled my fist back, it stayed there as my body quivered with fear. I must have stayed that way for almost 30 seconds when my friend started clucking like a chicken behind me. So I knocked on that door 3 times. As soon as I was done, I wheeled around and said, "There, I did it. Can we go now?" In a half-kidding tone, he said, "Hold on. Maybe they'll knock back." So I stood there as the seconds ticked away. I wasn't sure how long I had to stand there to prove my manhood, but after about 20 seconds, someone did knock back. In 3 loud knocks. I wasn't sure if my feet even touched the ground after that as I sprinted out of the cemetery. And let me tell you, my friend was right beside me for every step of the way as we raced out of the cemetery. The only time I ever visited that cemetery after that was when the sun was very high in the sky. This happened a few years ago. I worked at a bar in the Short North area of the north side of downtown Columbus. It meant for some late nights, but I was a bit of a night owl, so I didn't mind. One of the old timers stayed late at the bar on many nights, and he told the story of a ghost that haunted the area, particularly around the North Market. It's a place that has restaurants and stores and was popular during the day, but not very much at night. The old timer said that a cemetery used to be where the North Market now sat. As Columbus grew, the cemetery stood in the way of the growth of the city. The decision was made to relocate the cemetery, and this happened just before 1900. No one knew that some of the inhabitants of the cemetery would want to stick around. The old timer said that one ghost in particular used to walk by the North Market at night. Being curious, I decided I needed to check out this story. Usually, I'm a bit squeamish when it comes to things like this, but it was close by, so I didn't have to do a lot of work to check it out, and I could always retreat into the bar if something got scary. I waited around and the minutes ticked away as I watched the building. This went on for about a half an hour. Just as I was about to give up, I saw something coming along the north side of the building, which was exactly where the old timer said that the ghost always appeared. I felt my heart start to beat a little faster and a tremor went down my spine. An old man in old-fashioned clothes and hat walked along slowly, as if he didn't have a care in the world. As he got closer to me, I began to feel lightheaded. Could have been fear, but it felt as if something was clouding my mind. I had to brace myself against my car for a moment, and my vision swam. A moment after that, the man evaporated, as if he were never there. In my short life, it was one of the freakiest things I'd ever experienced, and I had trouble believing what my eyes had actually seen. I got out of there quickly and seriously doubted my sanity, but when it came down to it, I knew what I had seen was real. After that night, I stayed away from the old timer and asked to be moved to the day shift, but that wasn't enough. So I left my job soon after that. Seeing one ghost in my life was one too many.